Imagine you're at your desk, gazing at an email invitation for a social event you'd rather skip. Your finger hovers above the accept button, and a familiar knot tightens in your stomach, the sensation that arises when you're about to agree to something that doesn't resonate with who you are or what you truly desire. Does that sound familiar? We've all experienced it. In a world that constantly pulls us in various directions, mastering the art of saying no is essential for leading a life aligned with our values and true selves. But why is it so challenging? More importantly, how can we improve our ability to say no? Today, we'll explore the Stoic perspective on rejecting commitments that don't align with our principles. Don't worry if you're not well versed in Stoicism. By the end of this video, you'll have a practical toolkit to help you make decisions that genuinely reflect who you are and what you believe in. Let's begin with the fundamental question. What exactly are values? Think of them as your personal guiding star, the principles that steer your choices and define your character. They're not mere abstract ideas, but the foundation of your identity. For you, it might be honesty, creativity, or family. Whatever they may be, your values are distinctively yours. However, it's all too easy to lose sight of these values in our hyper-connected world. We face constant bombardment from social pressures, expectations, and endless opportunities. It's akin to being in a bustling marketplace, where everyone is clamoring for your attention. Amid this chaos, saying yes often feels like the simpler choice than saying no. This is precisely where Stoicism comes into play. Now, don't let. On one hand, there are external pressures and the lure of financial security, while on the other hand, stand your values, integrity, and belief in ethical business practices. What do you do? A Stoic perspective would prompt Sarah to look within herself. What holds more significance, short-term gain or long-term peace of mind? By saying no to this job, Sarah isn't merely rejecting money, she's affirming her principles. She's choosing to exercise control over the one thing she truly can, her own choices and actions. You might think that sounds great, but rejecting opportunities isn't easy. And you're right. Standing firm in your values requires courage, especially when facing temptation or pressure. But keep in mind that courage isn't about the absence of fear. It's about taking action despite fear. The Stoics recognized this. They understood that living in accordance with your values often means swimming against the current. They also knew that this struggle provides life with meaning. As Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. So how do we nurture this strength? How do we learn to say no without feeling guilty or fearful? It all begins with clarity. Get clear in what genuinely matters to you. Take a moment right now to reflect on your non-negotiables. What principles would you uphold, even if it costs you something? Once you have this clarity, the next step is practice. Like any skill, saying no becomes easier over time. Start small. The next time you're invited to an event you'd rather not attend, politely decline. If you're asked to take on a task that doesn't align with your priorities, respectfully explain why you can't. Remember, saying no doesn't have to lead to conflict. It can be done gracefully and respectfully. A simple, "Thank you for considering me, but I have to decline," is often sufficient. You don't owe anyone a lengthy explanation for upholding your values. As you practice, you'll notice something interesting. Each time you say no to something that doesn't resonate with your values, you create space for what does. It's like decluttering your life, removing what doesn't serve you to make room for what does. This brings us to the idea of essentialism, modern philosophy that reflects many Stoic principles. Essentialism teaches us to differentiate between what's truly important and what's merely noise. By saying no to the non-essential, we free up our time, energy, and resources for what genuinely matters. Consider this. Every yes is a trade-off. When you agree to one thing, you inevitably decline something else. The question is, are you making that trade-off consciously? Are you saying yes to what aligns with your values? Or are you allowing others to dictate your choices? I can almost hear some of you thinking, but what about compromise? Isn't life about give and take? Absolutely. The Stoics didn't advocate for a rigid, inflexible approach to life. They understood the importance of social connections and civic duty. The key is to differentiate between necessary compromises and unnecessary concessions. Imagine you're Alex, a parent balancing a demanding career and family life. Your boss asks you to take on a project that requires working late for the next month, which means missing your child's soccer games. At first glance, it may seem like a clear conflict between work and family values, but let's delve deeper. The Stoic approach here isn't about making a black and white choice between work and family. It's about finding a solution that respects both values, professional responsibility, and family commitment. Alex might negotiate a flexible schedule, propose working from home some days, or find ways to include the family in the decision-making process. This is where the Stoic principle of preferred indifference comes into play. The Stoics believe that while we should prefer certain outcomes, we shouldn't become overly attached to them. In Alex's case, the ideal outcome might be achieving a perfect balance between work and family. However, if that's not feasible, the focus shifts to responding virtuously to the situation. Alex could accept the project, but find creative ways to stay connected with the family during this busy time. Or perhaps Alex declines the project while proposing an alternative that meets the company's needs without sacrificing family time. The key is making a decision that Alex can stand behind with integrity, regardless of the outcome. This leads us to an important point. Saying no isn't about avoiding difficulty or seeking an easy life. Sometimes, saying no is the more challenging choice. It might involve turning down a promotion to remain true to your values or ending a relationship that doesn't align with your life goals. The Stoics would argue that these difficult no's are often the most significant ones. Think back to a time when you declined something tempting that didn't align with your values. How did it feel in the moment? Probably a bit uncomfortable, right? But how did it feel afterward? Often, there's a sense of relief and lightness. That's the feeling of being in alignment with your true self. Now, let's tackle the elephant in the room. Fear. Fear of missing out. Fear of disappointing others. Fear of consequences. These anxieties often compel us to say yes when we should be saying no. The Stoics had a lot to say about fear. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." What Seneca meant is that our fears are frequently exaggerated. We envision worst-case scenarios that rarely occur. The next time you hesitate to say no, ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? And how likely is it really? Often, you'll discover that the consequences of saying no are far less severe than you imagine. Let's consider a practical example. Imagine you're Jamie, a college student whose friends are pressuring you to go out drinking the night before an important exam. You want to study, but you're anxious about being left out or labeled as boring. The fear of social rejection is nudging you toward a yes. A Stoic approach would encourage Jamie to confront this fear. Is one night of socializing worth compromising your academic goals? Will true friends reject you for prioritizing your studies? By confronting these fears head-on, Jamie can make a decision based on values rather than fleeting emotions. This doesn't mean the decision will be easy. Saying no to peer pressure is tough at any age. But remember, anytime you say no to something that doesn't align with your values, you're affirming your authentic self. You're building a record of integrity that will serve you well throughout your life. Now, discuss a common pitfall: the guilt trip. Whether from family, friends, or colleagues, we've all faced subtle or not so subtle pressure to say yes out of guilt. But we always spend holidays together, a relative might say. For those on the team willing to work weekends, a boss may suggest that the Stoic answer to guilt trips is straightforward yet impactful. You are accountable for your actions and choices, not for the emotions or expectations of others. This doesn't imply being inconsiderate or indifferent. It means understanding that while you can manage your behavior, you cannot control how others respond to it. Let's revisit our earlier example of Sarah. The graphic designer who declined an unethical job offer. She might experience guilt trips from family members concerned about her financial security. A stoic response would involve acknowledging their worries, clearly explaining her reasoning, and then releasing attachment to the outcome. Sarah has no control over whether her family grasps or approves of her decision, but she can manage her actions and responses. This leads us to another vital element of saying no: communication. The skill of saying no goes beyond the refusal itself. It encompasses how you express it. Clear and respectful communication can often soften the impact of a no and even strengthen relationships in the long run. Here are some practical tips for delivering your no. Be clear and direct. Ambiguity can create misunderstandings and false hopes. Show appreciation. Thank the person for considering you or the opportunity. Briefly explain if necessary, but avoid over-explaining or making excuses. Offer an alternative if possible, but only if it aligns with your values and capacity. Stand firm. Pressured. Calmly restate your position without becoming defensive. Remember, you aren't responsible for managing others' disappointment. Your role is to communicate your decision clearly and respectfully. Now, let's tackle a common concern. Won't saying no restrict our opportunities? Will we miss out on experiences or connections? Here, the Stoic practice of negative visualization can be beneficial. This doesn't mean adopting a pessimistic outlook, but rather imagining what life would be like if you said yes to everything. Picture a life filled with obligations you didn't genuinely want to take on, where your time and energy are continuously drained by activities that don't resonate with your values. Doesn't sound fulfilling, does it? By saying no to what doesn't serve us, we create space for opportunities that truly matter. Think of it like tending a garden. If you allow every plant to grow unchecked, you'll end up with a chaotic mess where nothing flourishes. However, by carefully pruning and saying no to what doesn't belong, you create room for the plants you wish to nurture. Your life is that garden. What do you want to cultivate within it? This brings us to an essential point. Saying no isn't merely about avoiding what you don't want. It's about making room for what you do want. It's about crafting a life that mirrors your values and aspirations. Each no to something misaligned with your values is a yes to your authentic self. Let's illustrate this with another example. A software engineer who loves his job, but feels a strong pull toward teaching. He's been offered a promotion that entails more money and prestige, but also longer hours and increased stress. Simultaneously, he can volunteer to teach coding to underprivileged kids on weekends. The promotion is alluring. It's what Abid is expected to want: more money, higher title. Yet, deep down, it doesn't align with his values of work-life balance and community service. A Stoic approach would prompt Abid to look beyond the superficial benefits and consider what genuinely fulfills him. By saying no to the promotion and yes to the teaching opportunity, Abid isn't limiting himself. He's aligning his life with his values and creating space for what genuinely matters to him. In doing so, he's likely to find more satisfaction and purpose than any promotion could offer. This doesn't mean the choice is easy. Abid might face questions from colleagues or family who don't understand why he's rejecting a great opportunity. Here's where another Stoic principle becomes valuable: focusing on what's within our control. Abid can't dictate others' opinions about his choice, but he can control his actions and responses. He can calmly and confidently explain his decision without feeling the need to justify himself. He can remind himself that he's acting in alignment with his values and find peace in that awareness. Now, let's address another frequent worry: the fear of damaging relationships by saying no. Many of us agree to things to maintain harmony, especially with family and close friends. However, is a relationship healthy if it requires you to continually compromise your values? The Stoics valued social connections, but emphasized the importance of authenticity within these relationships. When you consistently say yes while wanting to say no, you're not just betraying yourself. You're preventing others from truly knowing and understanding you. Consider Maya, an introvert who cherishes her alone time. but her extroverted best friend Liam constantly invites her to social events. Maya often agrees out of fear of hurting Liam's feelings or jeopardizing their friendship. Over time, however, she feels drained and resentful. A stoic response would encourage Maya to have an open discussion with Liam, explaining her need for solitude and setting boundaries. Maya isn't rejecting Liam, she's inviting him to know her more authentically. While this honesty might cause initial friction, it lays the foundation for a deeper, more genuine friendship. Remember, true friends and healthy relationships should respect your values and boundaries. If saying no damages a relationship, it's worth evaluating whether that relationship was beneficial for you in the first place. Let's delve deeper into self-compassion and learning from our experiences. Imagine you're Chris, a recent college graduate starting your first job. Eager to make a good impression and fearing being labeled as problematic, you say yes to every request, even when it means working late or taking on tasks that make you uncomfortable. After a few months, you're exhausted, stressed, and feeling disconnected from your values. This is a pivotal moment. The easy route would be to blame yourself for not setting boundaries sooner. However, the Stoic approach, combined with self-compassion, differs. Rather than harshly criticizing yourself, ask, what can I learn from this? Perhaps you've gained insight into your limits and the necessity of work-life balance. Maybe you've realized your fear of being perceived as difficult was exaggerated. These insights are invaluable. They're not failures, but stepping stones toward living more authentically. Remember, the goal isn't perfection. The Stoics recognize that life is an ongoing process of growth and refinement. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, wrote in his journal, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This is not intended to be morbid, but to remind us to live intentionally and in accordance with our values every day. How can we implement all of this? How can we cultivate the strength to say no consistently and confidently? Here are some practical strategies rooted in Stoic wisdom. Regular self-reflection. Take time each day to reflect on your choices. Did your actions align with your values? Where did you say yes when you wanted to say no? This isn't about judgment, but about fostering self-awareness. Practice negative visualization. Regularly envision what your life would be like if you always said yes. This can strengthen your resolve to say no when it matters. Start small. Begin with low-stakes situations. Say no to a minor request that doesn't align with your values. As your confidence builds, tackle more challenging scenarios. Prepare your responses. Have a few polite but firm phrases ready for when you need to say no. This can help you respond confidently in the moment. Seek support. Surround yourself with individuals who respect your values and boundaries. Their encouragement can bolster your courage when saying no is tough. Practice empathy. Remember that when you say no, you're not just honoring your values, you're also allowing others to respect those values. Let's see how these strategies play out in real life. Meet Elena, a marketing manager who values creativity and ethical business practices. She's been asked to work on a campaign for a product she believes is misleading to consumers. This presents a challenging situation. Saying no could have professional repercussions, but saying yes would compromise her integrity. Elena decides to approach this stoically. First, she reflects on her values and the potential consequences of her decision. She visualizes both scenarios, the discomfort of saying no and the long-term dissatisfaction of sacrificing her ethics. Next, she prepares her response, emphasizing clear and professional communication. She might say, "I appreciate you considering me for this project. However, I have concerns about the product claims that conflict with my professional ethics. I would be happy to discuss alternative approaches that align with both our goals and ethical marketing practices." Elena also seeks support, discussing the situation with a trusted mentor, which helps her gain perspective and reinforces her commitment to her values. By following these steps, Elena isn't just saying no to a single project, she's affirming her integrity and potentially setting a positive example for her colleagues. possibly initiating a valuable conversation about ethical practices within her company.